Hey everyone, we are back for our weekly podcast, and I am super excited. I have two special guests with me. My bestie,
Yeah.
who has been on a few podcasts with me, and this is the first time we've actually been live together in the
Yeah.
room. We have Pastor Musser from Tabernacle International Church, and she brought a friend with her today. And I'm super excited because I followed them online. They did a podcast. If you guys have not seen it, go check it out. We have Dana. Dana, you want to put your last name or just Dana? We're going to stick with Dana.
You can do my last name.
Dana Hamilton, right?
Yes.
And she's with a group called
You Matter Too.
You Matter Too. So, and she drove all the way from South Carolina to be with us here today. Yep. So we're just super excited. So welcome, ladies, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So tell us, start off, I want you to tell me more about You Matter Too. What it is that you guys are doing, and what was the motivation behind it?
So we're a social justice movement, and when we first started, I just knew that God wanted me to step outside of the four walls, so to speak, and really reach the community, meaning everyone mattered. Everyone's voices mattered. It didn't matter if you were, from the streets, if you were homeless, if you were Black, if you were white, but everyone mattered. And then it just kind of sprung into the social justice movement because I always say, like, your destiny finds you. So it just kind of turned into that. We had, what really popped it off was we had a local high school in my area have a situation occur where a teenager put a derogatory word on a rock, and it was to put down, Black men and women. And so, with that being said, everybody in the community contacted me at the time because they knew what I stood for. They knew what the organization stood for. And so, at that point, we started hosting local forums that then went national, that then went to Washington Post and things like that. And I tell everybody it was the hand of God because literally I was just being available and just letting God do what God wanted to do. So that's kind of how it sprung forth. And then we just it just kind of evolved into the social justice movement that I believe God intended it to be, just by being available.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, she actually, there was a Confederate monument or memorial.
Well, we were very active we partnered with other organizations. There was other younger organizations that came in, and we all advocated and protested to have the local monument torn down for years. I'm from Lexington, North Carolina, so it's a very small community. Davidson County is a very large county, but in a lot of ways a very small closed-minded county. And so for years, others had went before us years ago trying to do the same thing, and it was just always closed door. But, our mayor in the city kind of challenged the county, and then all of us coming together and refusing to quit out there day in and day out, protesting and coming together unified. To bring it down is what we marched. We did the Unity March last year. You Matter Too partnered with a local organization, and we did the very first Unity March where we really had all walks of life out there to really just walk it out together and say, you know what, we're going to stand for what's right. So we did a lot of things, but going back to how it all started, it was just more or less me saying, God, I know you want more from me. I know you've called me to this. I knew God called me to ministry as well. But I kind of got my feet wet in the first bit of obedience. I had to be obedient, and I believe that you have to be obedient even in the small things in the beginning. And the small thing for me was just stepping out by faith, not having all the answers, and just putting it out there and declaring this will be the organization, and we'll let God lead it, and God always has. So.
And that's the part that's really interesting. A lot of times I think that when we have these discussions, we had one recently, I think, about how ministry has not taken on the role they're supposed to take on, right? And I think we've had this discussion at your church when we did the thing that ministry has kind of failed to be on the forefront. And we were actually, I was having a meeting with somebody maybe like 2 weeks ago, and one of the pastors brought up to our attention, like, that there was a protest that was going on, and the Black Lives Matter movement was hosting the protest. And when Jesse Jackson got there, like, they told him, like, we don't need you here, kind of deal.
Wow.
And I think that a part of that's just because we've been so absent for so long. And it seems like how we have the lights in the room, when it comes to ministry, if the light is not big enough, some pastors don't want to deal with it.
That's good.
And that's crazy, and that's dangerous at the same time. Why is it so important, Pastor Musser, for the faith-based community to be involved?
Well, it's so important to me.
And I will point this out. So you guys can't see this, but her nails actually have BLM on them.
Yeah.
So
Oh, and I have my bracelet too. But the reason that's important is if you're, in my opinion, and I don't know really, I think it's more than my opinion. I think it's truth, but you can't follow Jesus Christ and not care about the suffering of other people and the dying of when a whole race is crying out and dying. And there's so much prejudice and hate toward a race. You can't just put the name of Jesus Christ, on yourself and not care at all, because Jesus was always the first one to jump in between the oppressor and the oppressed. And he was always the one that, went to the one that was like, I know it's cliche at this point, but he left the 99 and went for the one. So the whole Bible, I always say that Jesus was the biggest, or is and was the biggest social advocate in the world. And he always, the Bible's full of, God is a God of justice. Justice and love work together with mercy and truth. So to me, you can't really follow Jesus Christ and not, first of all, have compassion. To me, the most Christ-like, trait is compassion. So you care for other people. You just care. And then when certain race is targeted and killed and shot unarmed, all over and over and over and over, you can't be and then see the demand, Pastor Sean, as I see it too, is the body of Christ needs to lead. And like you said, the body of Christ, a lot of Christians get mad at Black Lives Matter and other organizations. You matter too, for coming in and standing up for change. But my question to the Christians that get mad at them, because they'll be the first ones to say, well, they're Marxists. Well, then what are you doing?
Right.
Then where has the church been? Like, the church was absent, and even up to when George Floyd was murdered, it was like, this is the time for everybody to stop. This is really the time. And we at our church, our church is very diverse, that, but a lot of our Black pastor friends were saying, and this was the first time we heard them say this. And so we really have been more active, like all the way in, than ever before, because we had so many Black pastors screaming out and crying out. And we personally were there all along. We were there, and the church was personally, just because of its diversity, but Black pastors were crying out, we need our white brothers and sisters. We need Caucasian pastors to stand with us. Like, the Black church has been standing since the days of Dr. King, but where has the rest of the church been in the body of Christ? So it's like, stand up now. And I don't understand how people can be leading the body of Christ, leading the body, literally, he's the head and we're the body of Jesus Christ, and not stand up in these days and do more than just, it's a great start, because some pastors aren't even acting like anything's happened. Like, some even won't even say anything. But we have to get beyond saying things to doing. And that's why I appreciate so much our partnership with both of you. And, specifically because you're in our area. And I appreciate so much everything that Black Push does. And I appreciate, and of course, you're a man of God yourself, Pastor Sean. And the fact that what's unique but with all of us is that we are strong advocates for social justice, and we're also, all three of us are pastors, ordained pastors, and there is unfortunately there's not many pastors who will go there with social justice, and it's part of the gospel. It's the main part of Jesus Christ's life. So it's a blessing to partner with you, because you're leading the way in Atlanta and in Georgia in social justice. And so it's easier, we always say it's easier, somebody who's doing it, it's easier to just partner with them and with her. It's easier for us to partner with each other than to everybody just, reinvent the wheel or do your own thing. And because you have experiences with, pastor groups, and it's better if we just all come together, because we know one can put 1,000, two can put 10,000, but get us. And she's experienced the same thing, like other groups that are all trying to do the same thing, but instead of coming together, there's competition between them or something. So I do not take for granted the partnership with either of you, that we can just work together. And I am literally here to serve you and to serve you. And however we can do this to bring about true change and bring about true justice, and make, like you're drafting the Fair Justice Act, whole legislation to completely reform our whole justice system in the worst state in the country, probably in terms of those things, or one of them. And just to be able to serve you and to serve her, what she's doing is big as well, and never been done that I know of. And just to come together, and the whole thing is, to turn things around for the people of this country, and to turn things around for those who have been the most marginalized, the most afflicted, the most, just demonized, the most just treated violently and unequally. It's just to turn that ship around. We have to come together and use all the resources that we all have and put it together and get this ship finally going in a different direction. So,
and I find it interesting because one of the things that I have been most blessed by, somebody asked me the other day, like, why do you do this? And I'm like, I really don't know. I know, but in the moment, I didn't have an answer for it. And they were like, you're fighting for kids and you don't have kids. I was like, well, I have a niece and nephew, and I have two godsons, right? And I told you the story about my godson who took the BB gun to school one day and recently. And the officer literally looked at him and told him, if you were 50 feet away from me and I couldn't tell what it was, I would have had every right to shoot you. And he's 8 years old, right? And I thought about that moment. And it's like, for everything that's going on in society, you would think that at some point we would find better ways to communicate. We would find better ways to kind of bring the heat down on some of these things. And there's no, to the offense, right? I don't believe every officer is bad. Absolutely not. I say that publicly. I know too many good officers. I would say that the system is 99% great officers, but that's still at 1%. And it's kind of like we look at when we use the stat of like how minorities or black people are 14% of society, but we cover 50% of prisons, right? When you zoom in on that fact, that 1% can make it really look bad for everybody. And you used to be a past police officer.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I'm glad you brought that up because we talk about it a lot about how, and I even kind of educate her sometimes because she sees it from one angle and I see it from both. Because I've been there. I know what life was like before. I know what it was like in the career, and I know what it's been like after the career. And now being a part of social justice, who would have ever thought, right? But I believe God orders our steps, and I believe that God allowed me to be in that for the 10 years that I was so that I could experience every level of it and see all the different things that happen in the career. And you're very right. There are a lot of good officers out there. I do want to say that there's a lot of good officers out there, officers that really mean well, that have the right heart, that really do want to do the right thing. And I was one of those officers. And so, even whenever I left 4 years ago. And I tell everybody, like I walked out, to pursue God. I had no idea what God wanted to do. I just knew that it was time for me to pursue what he always wanted me to do, and that was ministry. And I didn't know how that was going to look. I didn't know that later he would lead me into the social justice aspect, but it kind of just makes sense now. But I remember whenever I was in, not only did I hold myself accountable, because I served a community that was predominantly a Black community. And so I really held myself to a higher standard because when you do have officers that have did wrong and have did things that were unjust, right? Then that makes your job as a good officer even harder because you're like, not only do I want to be an officer of integrity and an officer that brings communities together and does the right thing, but I have a lot of work cut out for me for all the other ones that didn't do it that way. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And and I would hear that on the street, like, wow, Officer Hamilton, like you're cool, like you understand, you really get where we're coming from, stuff like that. Whereas they would share their encounters with other officers in that area that maybe moved on or no longer with the department or whatever the case might be. And it wasn't like that. And so they were always like, and I kind of felt like, and I kind of joked about it with some people out on the street at one point. And I said, I think I'm spoiling y'all, because I try to be really good to my community. Because here's the thing. When you're an officer, you are to serve and protect. Protection doesn't come first in that, and there's a reason. You are to serve.
Right.
You are to serve your community. Whether you're a pastor, whether you're a police officer, if you take some type of oath to serve, and I look at it the same way with being a pastor, you're called to serve. An evangelist, you're still called to serve. But, whichever way you want to look at it, if you're in any leadership capacity, you should be a servant leader.
Right.
And to take that oath, I took that serious. So it wasn't always about arresting someone. It wasn't always about taking everybody to jail. It was about discretion. And we had that, and we were given that. So, and a lot of times, certain officers that are not of good moral, conduct, they abuse that. that piece. And so, yeah, we can take people to jail, but we don't have to take everybody to jail. Yeah, we can pull our weapon out, but is it justified? I used to tell people all the time, I did a lot of training for state of North Carolina, and I would always train other officers like, hey, if you've got to pull your weapon out, it better be a situation where it's life and death. If you're just pulling your weapon out to intimidate another individual or whatever, you're wrong, And so I know a lot of officers that even I worked around, right? Sometimes they would just be out, it's almost like they used their position to intimidate, And that's never what it was about. And that's not where law enforcement was founded. It wasn't founded on intimidation. It was founded on servanthood. And I think somewhere across the lines, there's certain officers that forgot what it's like to be a servant leader. And so that's what gets officers in trouble. They go out there and they get a big head. They think they're above the law, or they're above, doing things, the way I always taught was when you're in uniform, you act the same way as you would outside of uniform. Mm-hmm. So I never had an issue with people respecting me or loving me or caring for me as an individual, even in the uniform, because of the way that I treated them. Mm-hmm. People used to say, well, are you scared to go out to the store or something when you're off duty of people that you've arrested? And I was never scared. I would treat a felon, and I don't even want to say a felon, a person that happened to have a felony background. Mm-hmm. I'd rather say it that way because I don't do labels. So a lot of officers would label, right? Well, he's a felon. Well, she's a crackhead. Well, this, that, whatever. That's not okay. There's still people. There's still somebody's sister. There's still somebody's mother, daughter, sister, brother. So anyway, with all that being said, they would ask, well, aren't you scared going out? And I'd be like, no, I'm really not, because I treat everybody with respect.
Right.
Does every officer do that? No. Do most officers do that? Yes. But even that 1%, even if we bump it up to 5%, 1% is bad enough. You bump it up to 5%, we have a real problem. And so I think the problem is it's been going on for years. I wasn't one of those people, and I stood up against that. If I ever saw an officer, I was in leadership when I left, and if I'd ever had an officer working for me that treated somebody crazy or unjustified, I dealt with that. I didn't have that on my squad. I didn't have that around me. But at the same time, that 5% or that 1%er that's out there abusing, the oath that they took, they're the ones that makes it corrupt for everybody else. And so, having been an officer now on the other side of things, I get just as frustrated as Pastor Lisa does and other people when I see these videos, when I see the lieutenant that was in the Army that's literally ordered out of his car when he doesn't comply because he's trying to protect his life. Right. He's literally trying to protect his life. Everything about that man said, I'm scared. My hands are up, because the military teaches, keep your hands up, don't do this, do that. Sorry. They're also taught, right, not to pull your weapon unless you're going to use it this time, whatever. So he knew, he was like, if I move my hands, there's a chance that I may get shot. So, right. That's why he didn't want to move. And so I was watching that whole video go down. I actually sent it to her, and I was in tears about it. I was so mad, I think, and also just the compassion that's coming from my heart toward it is like, why are y'all doing this? Why are y'all making other officers look bad? Now it's national, right? So in all the turmoil.
I think they even told him at one point, you should be scared while they maced him.
They did.
Like a dog.
They did.
But after that, what really got me, Sean, is after that, or Pastor Sean, excuse me, after that.
Sean, it's fine.
After that, they approached this guy. and that's what a lot of people didn't see in the beginning, but they went back and they showed the footage, but they approached this guy and try to basically talk him down and explain, because they know they're wrong. Right. They know they're dead wrong. And I had seen that in my career. It's not that I went my whole career and didn't see that. Now, if I saw it around me, I dealt with it, right? So.
Right. But even when you look at the situation that happened in, I think it was New Orleans or Louisiana, where we just seen video of a guy, or it just came out that the guy, that the way they had wrote out the police report that he had ran into a tree, was all a lie.
Yeah.
And I think that a big part of it is that when people can't trust the system, something about the system is messed up.
This is the part that I really feel like needs to be reformed with officers, and I hope that they do reform it. There's something that they've taught for years. See, a lot of things that the officers do, they're taught to do that.
Right.
Whether it's right or wrong, that's what you're taught to do. She's brought things up to me, and I'm like, no, actually, they are taught to do that. We were talking about shooting. Well, why do they shoot center body mass? They're taught to do. We were trained to do that. And it's to stop it's to stop the threat. Is the word that is used. It's to stop the threat. But going back to what I was saying, there's two words that get officers in trouble, and it's articulation and justifying. So when they created that, it wasn't so you could articulate what you did wrong really well and then justify it somehow in the court of law and then get by with it. That's not why that was there. It was there to say, hey, think about before you do what you do, can you articulate it? Can you really articulate that in law? And can you articulate that in a courtroom? And can you justify it?
Right.
Can you really justify it? And that was the principle for why it was there, right? To make an officer think before he acted. And now what you see a lot of times, just like what you were talking about, where they kind of like try to switch up the story or whatever, that's what a lot of officers will find themselves in when they know they've done something wrong. Instead of just being like, you know what, verbatim, this is what I told the man, this is what I did, this is what happened. They try to use the articulate and justify piece to manipulate their story versus being honest about their story. So it's been manipulated by certain officers. I'm not saying all officers. There are some, though, that do that. And I think that gets officers in trouble, but they're trained, right, to think about it before they do it. It's not after the fact when you've already made a mistake that you go back and type up a really good report and try to sit there with your partner and try to figure out how we're going to make this look, right? That's not what it's there for. So though it had good purposes in the beginning, over time, I think officers have abused those two words.
And I think it goes back to, I think the whole system needs to be reformed from the perspective that I think officers are meant to enforce the law, right? The secretary, the DA's office is meant to read between the lines and to look at if there's justification to actually pursue charges. But the DA's office has taken more of a role of feeling like their job is to be the attorney for the police department. And they have to remember that they're not there for the police department. They're there because on the top of the paper it says the state of Georgia against whomever. They represent the people of the state, not the police force.
Right.
And judges have to be unbiased from the perspective that they have to understand that their role is to look at the state's whatever argument and look at the defense and make sure that the law is justified, right? And we don't have that type of system. I'm anti, and very much becoming more so anti grand jury process. I feel like if we're going to continue to have it, open it up to where if a police officer is able to have somebody represent them in grand jury, why should the average person not be able to?
Right.
Or just eliminate the grand jury process altogether. There's certain states that only use it for like major crimes, or you know what I'm saying? Like there's certain states or they don't use it for every single crime.
It's not a fair process.
It's not a fair process at all. And we've spoke to DAs who've agreed that it needs to be taken away or reformed. So from your perspective, Pastor Lisa, like, why are people, I don't know how to phrase this question, but why are people so blinded by their own racism? And you know what I'm saying? Like, you talk to people and they be like, oh, I'm not racist because I hire black people. I'm not racist because
that's a racist comment in itself.
Yeah, like I hire Mexican people. I've worked for people who before it was like, there's no way I can be racist. Look at you. You're my whatever position I was in. How could I be racist when you sit in the highest position we have in this company? You run the whole company. Yeah, but at the same time, when there's a black person that's coming up to the door and you guys cringe or you guys go lock the door because you don't know who they are. But a white person comes in there freely and there's a whole different reality. Or a black manager's laid on a deposit and you say to them like, oh, well, something sneaky's going on. But if a white manager's laid on a deposit, it's like, oh, well, they must have had something come up because they're never late kind of deal, right? Why are people so blinded by their own racism?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because to me, in my humble opinion, like now it's not even enough to claim to be anti-racist because those are just words. So in my humble opinion, if you're not actively fighting against it, and I'm not going to say if you're not actively fighting against it, you're racist because that's you can't generalize and be overly broad like that. But a lot of people, it's like I've heard you say, Sean, about the man in the mirror, that until we look at the man in the mirror, and you referenced the Michael Jackson song and the biblical truth too about before you go out and try to tell everybody else that, you're not to be racist or whatever, then you have to first look at the man in the mirror. And when I heard you say that for the first time, it was so powerful because it's easier for people to see faults and flaws in everybody else. And But when they automatically just go to the same narratives, like, oh, well, I have a black friend, or I have a. But what if your daughter, marries a black man? When was the last time that you had a black family in your home? You welcome them to eat. How often are you, in real relationship with black people and people of any other race than your race? How, real relationships, like you go through things with them, their struggles and their pain. Because if you really weren't a racist, how could you not feel? How could you not empathize? And so it's just easier for people. And I think that a lot of it is what they call unconscious bias. That term, unconscious bias, where people are. A lot of it has to do with, of course, like generational upbringing. They're just brought up by racists, and that's all they know. So they don't label themselves specifically. It's just what they know. It's like, well, everyone flies the Confederate flag. Everyone does this. So it's just what they know. So to them, it's normal. So they can't see it until somebody, and that's why it's so important. Like she was saying, and you were saying, for the police officers to keep each other in check. It's also important for Caucasian people, to keep each other in check. And that means the people closest. Like everyone's quick to be a keyboard warrior and call stuff out online and everything. But what about that uncle in your living room at Thanksgiving? What about those little sly comments that you hear from people in your circle? And I think until people start really checking their own circles and teaching something different, but the unconscious bias, it's interesting that we're talking about the policing, because there was a study done recently as to, and thank God for cameras, because I always feel like, when like they can write anything in their report. Before cameras, they could say he resisted arrest to try to justify shooting of something. They could say anything, totally unchecked. So I'm thankful that there's cameras and there is some other kind of checks on it. But they took I can't remember, it was a ridiculous amount of surveillance from police body cameras. They took the footage and they actually analyzed this, like some psychotherapists, psychoanalysts, whatever, and they analyzed like 70,000 hours worth of film from police, and the unconscious bias, which is what people aren't aware of. And I'll get to that after this, but I would say if you're a Christian, you have to. Well, let me get to my story first. But the what they found in that was that just things like this, like when they walked up to a police car, and this is facts, and so this is indisputable stuff. They would walk up to a police car. If a white person was in it, they were more likely to come up and say things like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I stopped you," and do you mind if I see your license? And this is facts from analyzed footage of police cameras. If a black, especially man, was in the car, they would walk up to it overwhelmingly and say, "Put your hands on the wheel, sir. Put your hands on," and talk to them like that. Not even a good day or anything. And then they were also more likely in leaving a white person, a white driver, to say, "Okay, ma'am," calling them ma'am, using respect in terms and stuff like that, and to say, "Have a good day, ma'am." And then the black one, they just like shoved him on his way. So I mean, there is concrete proof that unconscious bias exists. Not only, police are humans too, so in all humans, but it's that very troubling when it's seen in the police force because of all of the brutality against African Americans that we see by police. But so it's very unconscious. So what I was saying is, if you're a Christian, every Christian should come before God every day and say, like David said, "Create in me a clean heart." Like just expose anything in me that's not of you, God, anything in me. And if we just really, truly, purely ask God to do that, he will do that. And if we hold each other accountable, so it all starts, it's a matter of the heart at first. Right. And we have to check each other. We have to keep our circles in check. If we, it's great to, and I admire, and I'm part of your efforts to change laws and her efforts to take down hate and defeat hate and fight hate. And, that's all great laws and things to change. But at the end of the day, the heart of people has to change. And that's, like you said, we have to be willing to see the man in the mirror and see the ugly parts and be willing to deal with the ugly parts in us first.
So it's interesting because, like I was telling you guys earlier, we did an event the Department of Labor. We're going to show that video. This is like clips. You guys won't be able to hear it because you don't have the headphones on. But it's like a 2.5 minute clip. But I want to show the clip to everybody, and I want to talk about some of the comments we got afterwards.
Can we put these on? Absolutely. Okay. I want to hear it.
The main reason that we're here right now is that Mark Butler, along with Governor Bryan County, have signed documents that are going to strip the federal unemployment benefits out of the state of Georgia.
Have been fired corporate immunity. Many of the workers that we're talking about right now are service or hospitality employees that are essential workers that have to be at the front line and that are exposed to pandemic.
I work in restaurants. We got employees who, during the height of the crisis, literally was making $7.25 an hour, catching the bus, walking to work to make sure that they were serving the community. And most of those employees got laid off because we had to cut back on people. And now you're telling those same people who probably don't even get the max benefit, which is $365 a week.
Open his doors and he did nothing and still does nothing. He has the power to hold the Georgia Department of Labor accountable and address the dereliction of duties as well as the fraud that has compromised Georgia. We all know that this system is broken and needs transparency through the advisory council, and we need new leadership both at the Georgia Department of Labor and for the state.
This agency provides hardworking people a lifeline to regain their dignity and provide for their families. To cancel the $300 payment for unemployed workers is not the leadership we need at this time, and now is the time to support our state workers, not hurt them. The Georgia worker builds, designs, transports, cleans, cooks, educates, organizes, repairs, stocks, protects, serves, and saves lives.
Because they're still waiting for unemployment. I ask that you think of these women as being your daughters. We are deeply concerned that you want to opt out of the federal funding prior to opening government agencies such as the Department of Labor. We are also concerned that the state would end these additional benefits without providing additional help with child care, especially for essential workers. People should not have to work 2 or 3 jobs to pay rent and make ends meet.
We have an employee shortage, so why isn't he raising the minimum wage?
Because they have young children. Schools are about to close for the summer, making even fewer options available.
Why? We should continue to have unemployment benefits through September. I'm not going to be redundant.
At the Department of Labor. And it was funny because we were just standing up because Governor Kemp wanted to say to people that he's going to end the additional $300 because he didn't see a purpose in having it, whatever the case may be. And the reality is that most Georgians who are on unemployment are not even getting the match. So they can get anywhere from $55 a week to $365 a week. And he wants to eliminate that. Majority of the workers who get unemployment probably making like $155 a week. So now he wants to convert them back from getting $455 a week, which is really breaking the state because they're not even paying for it anyway. The federal government is paying for it, meaning our tax dollars are paying for people to get this benefit. And the Department of Labor is not even open, so they're working from home. And the most recently, the legislator has the legislator working on for the next calendar. They're working on giving themselves a pay raise. So you want to tell me that people can live off $7.25 an hour? But what really caught me was that the comments that came from this, right? People were messaging us and they would put out a comment. One person, it really disturbed me. She was like, I was in eviction court and the lady had on long fingernails and new hairdo. Okay, that's $80, right? But it was geared at, let's be honest, long fingernails, new hairdo, right. Eyelashes, and they mentioned this in the comment. That's definitely aimed at my race, right? And I just found it so offensive. Like, people are saying you need to get back to work. Even if one person put, like, even if you're making 25 cents an hour, you need to get back to work. And at least it's hard-working money, right? You made hard-working money. You go make 25 cents an hour and you tell me how you feed your family, right? Again, it goes back to the whole thing about racism and people being blinded by their own racism, right? How can we as a society, definitely been like from a Christian standpoint, the Bible says, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Right.
I don't want none of my neighbors making $7.25 an hour. I don't want none of my neighbors not being able to take care of their family, or not being able to support their family, or not being able to help their family. I don't want
Yeah.
my neighbors to live that way. So
Well, I think, you just brought that up and I got all excited, but because I say that all the time, is love your neighbor as yourself. And the key to that, Sean, is, and I've been saying this for years, but like, to love our neighbor as ourselves, we have to learn how to love.
Right.
We have to learn how to love ourselves. We really have to learn how to love ourselves, because if we don't know what love looks like, if we don't even know how to love our own selves, then we can't love our neighbor. And, one thing, I know everyone's not like me, okay? I know everybody doesn't have the same passion I do. I think everybody should. I think we should all love each other, and I think we should all definitely love people who don't look like us and who are not like us. But what I'm saying is, when you're talking about, loving your neighbor, wanting the best for your neighbor, it even goes back to, I know, and if it's okay for me to bring this up, it even goes back to the white privilege piece, right? Being a Caucasian woman, and hearing other Caucasian people say, well, I'm not privileged. I work hard for my money. Like they're getting it all out of context. No one's saying that's not even what we're talking about here. We're just talking about, if you walk through a neighborhood at night, we were just talking about this last night. If you walk through a neighborhood at night, being a Caucasian male or female, and it's midnight and you're just walking through a neighborhood, you're probably going to be fine. But if you happen to be a black male walking through a neighborhood, right, and be even on the other side of the law enforcement side, how many times I got called out for suspicious black male, and it would just drive me crazy because I get out there and there was nothing going on. They'd just be walking through a neighborhood. So of course I would just check back 10-8, which means I'm back to work. I ain't even going to deal with this because there's nothing going on. And I would always ask, like, well, what was suspicious? Well, they said he was walking through the neighborhood. Well, and I would say, check me 10-8, which meant I'm back, open for calls, because I'm not going to go, walk up to this man, ask him what he's doing when he's not doing anything wrong, and that's when we, have to go back to loving our neighbor as ourselves. Whether you have a law enforcement uniform on, whether you're a pastor, whether you're just a regular human being, just trying to make it, we're all just trying to make it, whether we're a pastor, whether we're an officer, we're all people. And so at the end of the day, I just got to hit on that because it's been aching in my soul for some time now, especially since last year. Because I was like, if I have to see that one more time on Facebook about, well, I work hard for my money. Like, what does that even have to do with white privilege? We don't. So I'm going to educate some people right now. White privilege is not, how much money you make or how hard you worked in your life. White privilege is saying, could you be able to do the same thing that a black woman or black man could do? No, hands down. And the answer is no. And I know that because I have opened myself up. Like I said earlier, when you make yourself available to be used of God, when you allow God to use you in a different kind of capacity, you are able to see things from a different lens. Now, we all should see from that lens. We should all have an open lens to see everybody and to see everybody's struggles and to see everybody's go-throughs, not just see my own or not just think that I'm good and great, but like to actually see what's going on with my brother and sister, what's going on with the person across the street from me, what's going on with them, because just because my life looks good don't mean their life looks good. Just because I can walk through a neighborhood don't mean that they can walk through a neighborhood. Just because I can get pulled over by the police and just treated like, as politely as possible, doesn't mean that my brother that happens to be a black man is going to get treated the same. Doesn't mean he won't. It just doesn't. It also means it doesn't mean he won't, but it doesn't mean he will. Right. That's the whole point. So.
Okay. Well, about what you were saying about specifically about the body of Christ and these wages, if I can first throw in that in Georgia, women are the ones that are the most affected. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, African American women, and these are women who have spent all of 2020, taking care of everybody, holding everything down, burying so many family members to COVID, because there's another example, the healthcare system of racial inequity. Yeah. And a lot of them are single moms, they're holding down their children, they're holding down their parents, and they're holding down and they are the ones that most affected by this, what you're talking about. But I wanted to share specifically, especially since you said Christians, what the Bible says about unfair wages. James 5, verse 1, and then verse 4, it says, "Come now, you rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Indeed, the wages that you kept back by fraud from the laborers who harvested your fields are crying, and the cries of those who harvested have entered into the ears of the Lord of hosts." So you can be encouraged today and thank you for what you're doing, Sean and Black Push. But to anybody who's watching, you can be encouraged that unpaid wages, low wages, just horrible wages and dues, they do not escape the eyes and the ears of God. That verse right there says, if you've experienced that you've been denied what wage or what salary is due to you, or even what's right by you, be encouraged that God will fight for you, because God sees and hears everything. But I think it's powerful that the Bible specifically speaks to, that there are people, laborers, crying from the wages that are being kept back from them. And if this doesn't speak biblically exactly to what you were out there protesting, then I don't know what does. And I know there are other passages. There's a passage in Amos also that speaks specifically to, holding back fair wages and oppressing. There's a whole chapter in Isaiah 58. It talks about it's kind of correcting the religious people that are fasting to try to please God, like they're going through the motions of fasting and praying. And God says, if you really want to please me, this is the kind of fasting that pleases me. And then he goes into, you treat the people who work for you, who are employed by you, treat them right, you pay them fairly. That's in there along with a whole list of other things that is basically all against oppression, is Isaiah 58. And God's saying, if you really want to please me, don't do the religious fasting. Basically he's saying treat other people right and treat other people fairly.
And I think, it just, I don't know, it concerned me because it's crazy. Like, I don't get how that becomes the issue. That becomes the issue that people should be able to eat, right?
Right.
That becomes the issue. And we argue so much about getting people off like food stamps, stuff like that. Well, if they're not making money, how can we ever move them from different programs, right? I just think, and they did a survey too that stated that, like, in order to be able to survive in the city of Atlanta, you need to be making at least $25 an hour, roughly, right?
What's our minimum wage?
But the state
minimum
of Georgia
wage is poverty.
No, but
that's what that is.
But literally, the state of Georgia's minimum wage is $5.15 an hour.
Wow.
The only reason why people get $7.25 an hour here is because because federal supersedes state, right? So I call on Congress, I call on the U.S. Senate, do your jobs. Like, at the end of the day, for you guys to be able to keep making money, and even during COVID, their checks did not stop.
Come on,
Amen. Amen.
And they were shut down, and they were closed. They were working from home.
Yep.
But yet, when it came down to giving money to the people, it was always this big fight. When it comes down to trying to pass bills to help people be able to afford for their child to go to daycare, it's always a big fight, right? When they get all these benefits. I have a friend of mine who works for the Florida Senate, and she was saying, I was like, how much is your health insurance? She said she pays like $1 a month, and she gets great health insurance. Oh my goodness. Great health insurance. Wow. Just imagine that. Imagine the average person. We have to do something. I don't know how we as a society, and definitely for ourselves who calls ourselves a Christian nation, no matter what religion you come from, because most religions will tell you that we have to serve people, right? We have to be kind to people.
Yeah.
That's what...
No matter what you believe in.
No matter what you believe
in.
No matter whether you're a Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Buddhist, it tells you that you have to be kind to people, right?
Right.
How can you be kind to people when you're enriching your own pocket?
Come on
and
now.
Can't even look to know, like, I don't know how you do. If the state of Georgia passes an increase for everybody in the house to get a bonus or to raise their wage, there's something really wrong with the hearts of men.
But see, a lot of people say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And a lot of, what bothers me, Sean, I know I kind of go back and forth, former officer, so of course there's that piece, but then there's the other piece of me that's just I'm sold out to Jesus. You know what I'm saying? I don't claim to be anything but that. It's sold out to Jesus. We can have all kinds of labels. We can label people all kinds of things and, all kinds of, but to me, I'm just sold out to Jesus. And so when I'm saying that, it is the responsibility of the church to get involved in these things. So what I always heard growing up, which I don't think was really the right doctrine, was, don't mix politics with church. Don't talk about basically the hard things in church. But if you're in Christian faith, which the whole Christian faith was founded on Jesus Christ, Jesus went to the hard things.
Yes.
Jesus faced the hard things. Jesus stood up for the hard things. He didn't see the hard thing and say, I think I'm going to redirect my path and go over here. He went straight in. And in everything that he did, it was to teach others how to do it.
Right.
And so as as a Christian, I don't see how, yes, we have the Bible, obviously, that is our teacher, but when we just think about Jesus coming and changing it all, changing the whole game, right? Finishing it all for all of us, right? But he came to show us, he gave us the pathway, right? The Bible is also that pathway, yes, with his teachings and, the letters in red and all that. But if you just listen to the passages and put yourself in Jesus's place back then and in the heart of who he was. Like, he did not shy away from oppression. He ran toward it. He literally would probably run toward today in this day and time. And I've been saying this 2020. I believe that we had a revisitation. Well, I know I did. I had a revisitation of Jesus Christ. I did. Like, it was in a whole new way. It was in a whole different way. And I know we went through a lot of hurt and pain in 2020. We did. Like, it was a whole lot of stuff going on. And not even, and I can't even speak to what Black men and women and young people went through, during 2020. I can't speak to that. But what I can do is speak to the advocacy part of me of what I had to see and what I had to experience alongside of them, of being the empathetic person that I am and trying to put myself in their shoes and really listen and understand where they were coming from. And I think Jesus did that with everybody, you know what I'm saying? And so I wanted to hit on that piece for just a second, because we're talking about loving our neighbor, we're talking about wages, we're talking about all this stuff. But then a lot of times, I'm not saying every church and I'm not saying all churches, there is definitely a place for the church and church buildings everywhere and all that stuff. And we are the church, right? First and foremost. But what I'm saying is, it's been ongoing for years. And I think last year really made some churches either step up or sit down because it was to a point to where it was like, you can't use that as an excuse to ignore the things that are going on in your community, in your world, in the Christian arena. Like, you can't just ignore it. So it's not about, they get that all mixed up about mixing politics with faith. Like, well, you can't preach that from the pulpit and this, that, whatever. They get it wrong. It's not about taking sides. It's not about Democrat or Republican. It's not about division. It is about the political issues. So the whole reason why we have politicians is to hopefully fix the issues that are going on in our communities and our world, all that. And I believe God even talked about it numerous times in the Bible of people that were appointed to certain positions, right, to do certain things. I mean, we have Moses, we have this, I go through the whole line, and God appointed them. And so going back to what you were saying, they're in government making all this money, right? They didn't skip a paycheck the whole 2020, but everybody else was struggling. And to me, that's going back to almost like the days of Pharaoh. Like, they're just living La Vida Loca. Everything's good, while other people are struggling. And then they also have the right to either like you were talking about unemployment, stop it or start it or whatever. But at the same time, they're not in everybody's household.
Right. And the thing that, and I have to be reminded by this is that, we also have to understand too, and it's aggravating for us, but if we trust God, we know that sometimes God puts people in place to kind of humble us and remind us of the things that are important, right? There's a reason why we have a Governor Kemp in office right now, because he continues to remind me every day that there's problems with the system, right? And once again, I'm unbiased. I mean, I'm not saying I support or don't support him. But there's people like that, right? There's people who are there to remind us. And we know that he gave the children of Israel Nebuchadnezzar. And he gave them him, right? But at the same time, it's a humbling experience for the children of Israel, but it was also a humbling experience for Nebuchadnezzar. He gave them Pharaoh, right? And there's a Bible verse that said God that the hand of the king is in God's hand, and he'll turn it whichsoever way he wants it. But I think that a lot of times when God does allow these kind of things to happen, it's to wake us up and to call our attention to it, right? And to say that, at this point, and that's not my quote. You gave me credit for a quote I did not come up with. But there's a quote that I got when I was doing this thing with my mom, and the lady basically said on there, she said that if you see a problem, then it's your obligation to be the solution to the problem, or come up with the solution to the problem, right? So as we see these problems, there's a reason why we all connected, because we see the problems and we have an obligation to come up with solutions to be a part of it. So I think, Pastor Musser, because she's been everything that's going on in her county, I've attached her to it, and she's been right there. Even yesterday, I didn't make the meeting yesterday, and her and Ari from my team went down and met with DA Patsy and Daryl from Gwinnett County DA's office, right? And the thing that's humbling for me is that I'm a person who I have a record, right? So I know what it's like to be an ex-offender. But at the same time, God has put me in a place to where like it has not made a difference in my life, right? When I got out, it didn't stop me from being a manager where I wanted to be. And I mean, he opened every door he opened for me. Favor, right? But at the end of the day, he literally put me in a place to where now I have a voice in these halls of power.
Yes.
And my thing is that I want to be humbled by that, right? I don't want to take it as a place to be like, oh, okay, well, no, it's not about that. It's about still holding them accountable. There's some of these people I voted for, some of them I didn't vote for, but I'm going to still hold them accountable. Right now, our organization is working with talking to everybody who's running for office. We're building a list of everybody who's running for office on any level, whether they're Democrat or Republican. And if they're willing to hold a conversation with us, we're willing to hold that conversation because we understand that there's two sides to like every story, right? I mean, the reason why I'm so non-biased against police and don't think every police officer is bad because I've sat down with police officers and I've seen the training they go through. I mean, I met with a sheriff like 2 weeks ago, and we talked about their training program, and he talked about the things that they're doing in their training program. We talked about how some sheriff departments don't like the fact that we have so many city polices, right? They feel like that all that should be covered by the sheriff because in all reality, the sheriff is the only elected official by the people. The police chief is appointed by the commission, but the sheriff is elected by the people. So if we don't like what the sheriff is doing every 4 years, we can put the sheriff out, right? We can't do that with the police chief. And the only way we get them out is by voting the commission. But if they're close enough friends,
Right.
it never goes anywhere. But also, too, I wanted to point out that we have an event coming up on Juneteenth.
Yes.
And we're partnering with, there it goes right there. So we're partnering with, and you can fill up the whole screen while I talk about it so I don't forget. You can take up the whole screen. Kick olives out. Perfect. So this event, we're doing it with Antioch AME Church with Reverend Randy Simmons. And it is being, actually, I got connected into this event with Representative Rhonda Taylor, who I have fallen, like, she's the bomb. I love her. And we're doing a panel there. We're going to have Attorney Gerald Griggs. We're going to have other people as well. But there'll be also a panel discussion from like 1 to 1:45. But it's a votercade. It's to talk to the youth. Hopefully we get a message from our Vice President of the United States to share with the kids.
Yes.
So,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
this is a shout out to you that you guys have
Yes.
got my email. So let's work it out.
Let's go.
But that's on June 19th. And we'll be doing that at Antioch AME Church. So I just wanted to put that out there. So if you guys can be a part of it, you guys can send us email address, I think, on the bottom of it. And the last thing is that I wanted to give a shout out to this person. So everybody kind of see me sipping on tea. It's tea. It is tea. But there's a person in our building, and she can take up the whole screen too. We're going to give her a shout out because she does this all natural tea. And I have some issues sometimes, but this tea is the bomb. Like, it really does help. And you can go, and I think her website is Tavani. I wanted him to put her name up there so you can know how to spell it. But TIVONISG.com. So TIVONISG.com. So check her out. She has a whole bunch of natural remedies, and you could be Christian and still go natural, right?
Right.
But I thank you, ladies, for coming and being a part of this today. I think the discussion was really impactful. I think, Dana, you drove from North Carolina or South Carolina? North Carolina.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And I keep saying South Carolina. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But
I'm saying,
Yeah.
correct what you saying.
This guy right here. We could put the camera on him. This is like my big brother from that I never asked for. I mean, I got one. But we thank you for coming here from North Carolina. And we're going to worship together tomorrow at Tabernacle International Church.
Yeah.
So we'll be there
Looking
tomorrow
forward to
at 10 a.m. Yeah, 10 a.m. Tabernacle
Yes.
International Church in Lawrenceville. What's the address again?
It's 270 Simonton Road, Southwest. You have to put the Southwest in, or your GPS will take you the wrong way. Lawrenceville, Georgia, 30046. And our website, we just got a new website.
It's tic.church. I got
Ooh,
it. I got it. TIC.
Not church.
Yes.
You
So, I
got
mean, if you guys are ever in Lawrenceville area, go check them out. And the last message I do have is that if you guys are available on June 1st, remember, we'll be doing a rally with a whole bunch of different organizations, and not just ours. They've called us in. On June 1st, we'll be in front of the Department of Labor again, protesting for people to make sure that they can continue to survive during this time. But in just closing, one of the things I love so much is that you talked about is loving thy neighbor as thyself. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that we have obligation to each other. I don't care whether you're white, whether you're black. I mean, the reality is that when white people say to me, like, I wish I could run a day in your shoe, you can't, right? No matter how you try to empathize with us, no matter how you try to feel it, no matter how much we stand in the streets with each other, you would never really know what it's like to be a black man or a black girl. But at the same time, I would never know what it's like to be a white woman or a white man, right? And we have to be sensitive to that, because racism for me, yes, it does happen in our community a lot, but it can go either way. I mean, black people are racist against other races as well, right? And until we get to the principle of loving thy neighbor as thyself, we'll always end up here. We're going to continue to have this conversation. And it'll be 20 years from now, we'll still be having the same conversation. Yeah. So like you said earlier, Pastor Musser, it's the heart of men that has to change. So my prayer is that people be more sympathetic and try to at least understand what it's like. I'm not saying you're going to completely understand, but at least hold the conversations and try to understand.
And at a bare minimum, don't tell somebody how they should feel
Right.
when you're not them and you have no clue what it's like to walk in their shoes. Don't try to tell them how they should feel and what they should do, period.
Anything you want to close up by saying?
I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to come. And, I believe that we have a lot of work to do. And I say we because I believe in unity. I believe in collaboration. I'm in North Carolina. You guys are in Georgia, and so on and so on. And, the vision that I see and where we're heading right now with the people that are rising up in different communities to do exactly what we're doing is for it to become global. And it's going to have to, for us to really see that change that we're talking about, the change of heart. And it's going to come from people that are called to ministry, that are also called to social justice. It's not afraid to intertwine the two and to actually pave the way. Martin Luther King didn't do it wasn't easy for him either, right? But he paved the way. And so I believe God's raising up some people that's going to pave the way together as well.
And if people want to know more about your organization, is there a website they can go to?
They can go to youmatter2.net, youmatter2.net, or you can go to youmatter2 via Facebook.
And I do want to still continue to give a shout out. We're part of two different nonprofits. One is Newbie Corp, and we'll be back to Newbie Corp stuff next week. So you can go to www.newbiecorp.org to find out more information about us. And you can also go to Black Push, that's BLACKPUSH.org. But I'll be remiss to not also mention that we do this show every week in a studio owned by a guy who sits on the other side who annoys me, named Disco 100. So I want you guys to go to his YouTube page and check it out. It's Disco 100. Awesome. Sign up, register, help him out, and let's continue to build better together.
Yes.
Do it.
Thank you guys for today.